Nothing could have prepared me for the day I realized my own son had been my biggest fan. Before I begin, I want to give a fair warning. This story isn't easy to tell. It includes mature themes, new motherhood, loneliness, blurred boundaries, and betrayal. If any of that is too much for you, I understand. You might want to stop listening here. But if you stay, just know, I'm not here to shock. I'm here to be honest. To most people, I'm Liv Beard. I'm 39. Single mom of 2. I run a small clothing boutique out of a corner shop on the east side of town. I pack lunches. I sign school permission slips. I wave at the crossing guard every morning. You'd pass me on the street and not think twice. But behind all that? There was another version of me, one I never planned to become, but somehow slipped into. A version of me that lived behind closed doors, under dim lighting, with a username no one in my real life knew. Except, someone did. Someone too close. At first, it was just a side thing. Something to help with bills when the boutique sales dropped during winter. Posting photos here and there. Flirty messages. I didn't show my face. I never said my name. It felt safe. Anonymous. And in some strange way, it gave me a feeling I hadn't had in years. Like someone wanted me. Like I mattered. It filled a silence I didn't know was there. That silence had lived with me ever since my ex, KYNG, left. Ever since I stood alone in that quiet kitchen with 2 kids under 10, wondering if I'd ever feel anything again. But what started as control turned into something darker. Something I couldn't name at the time. And then, just like that, it shattered. Not from the outside. Not from strangers or trolls or leaks. But from the inside of my own home. From my son. From the boy I raised. The boy I fed. Hugged. Tucked in. The boy who knew me better than anyone else, and still chose to hide behind a screen, and watch. If you had asked me 10 years ago where I thought I'd be by now, I would have told you I'd be settled. Comfortable. Maybe remarried, maybe not. But definitely in control. I would have laughed at the idea that I'd end up back in a tiny rental house, constantly checking my bank app to make sure my account hadn't overdrafted again. But life doesn't care about your plans. I used to model, once. Not runway or anything glamorous. Catalogs. Print ads. That kind of thing. Enough to pay my bills and still walk into a room knowing I was the one people looked at first. Back then, I didn't think twice about being seen. I didn't question the shape of my hips or the lines under my eyes. I didn't flinch when a camera came out. Then I married KYNG Zavala. At first, he seemed solid. Confident. He had this quiet charm, like he didn't need to say much to be noticed. I liked that. I was tired of men who wanted to talk more than they listened. But that stillness turned into silence, and eventually, that silence turned into shame. After Lainey was born, everything changed. He stopped touching me. Stopped looking at me the way he used to. He started making little comments. Your thighs weren't like that before. Or, do you ever plan to lose the baby weight? I still remember the day I found him watching some young blonde girl on his laptop while I was in the kitchen washing bottles. I didn't even say anything. I just went back to scrubbing. Pretended I didn't see. We divorced when Nathaniel was 10. By then, I was already invisible in my own house. I took the kids. He took his silence and moved to another city. We haven't spoken more than a handful of times since. Raising 2 kids alone is a full-time job. A thankless one. I opened a boutique downtown selling handmade clothing and resale vintage. It's small. Sweet. But in this economy? Cute doesn't pay rent. Most months, I break even. On bad months, I lose money and pray the landlord doesn't notice the rent is late. It was around that time my friend Bonnie Dean came over for a glass of wine. I hadn't seen her in months. She looked radiant. Like someone who had been touched. Not just physically, but emotionally. She glowed. I asked if she'd gotten back with her ex, and she just laughed. "No, girl," she said. "I'm doing OnlyFans." I blinked at her. "Wait. You mean, like naked? She smirked. "Sometimes. But it's not what you think. It's not sleazy. It's controlled. It's actually empowering." I remember raising my eyebrows, skeptical. But when she showed me the money she was making, real screenshots, real deposits, it was like something clicked in my head. Not because of the money, although God knows I needed it. But because she looked like she had taken her body back. Like she wasn't waiting for someone else to tell her she was beautiful anymore. That night, after the kids went to bed, I stayed up. I stared at myself in the mirror for a long time. I tried to see what someone else might see. Not just the tired mom with her hair in a bun and circles under her eyes, but something else. Something I thought I had lost. And then I did something I never thought I'd do. I made an account. No face. No name. Just a username, Amina Bennett. A mix of made-up glamour and the kind of confidence I wished I had. Amina didn't wear baggy sweaters. She wore lingerie. She posed with soft lighting and whispered into microphones. She smiled like she had a secret, even though she didn't. At first, I barely posted. Just one photo. Then two. Then I saw the followers go up. Comments. Tips. Requests. It didn't take long before I realized there were people out there who wanted to see me, really see me. And not as a mom. Not as a failed wife. Not as someone's ex. Just me. But the truth is, it wasn't me they were seeing. It was her. Amina. She was bolder, filthier, funnier. She didn't flinch when someone asked her to spread her legs or call them daddy. She didn't feel shame. I built a fantasy for strangers and got paid to do it. It was thrilling. Terrifying. Addictive. And I justified all of it to myself by saying no one would ever find out. I didn't use my real name. I never posted anything with a background from my home. I kept the account off my main email. I created a whole new persona just to keep it separate. In my mind, the line was clear. Liv was the mom, the small business owner, the woman who made casseroles and folded laundry at midnight. Amina was everything else. And as long as I kept them apart, I thought I was safe. I had no idea how thin that line really was. If you're still with me, don't forget to like this video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more stories like this. Trust me, there's so much more to uncover. I didn't mean to get used to it. But I did. Within a few months, Amina Bennett was more than just a profile. She had fans. Regulars. A rhythm. Certain nights of the week, I knew who would be online and what they'd want. I memorized screen names like people memorize neighbors' dogs or grocery store cashiers. It was strange, the comfort in that predictability. The money didn't trickle in, it flowed. I paid the rent 2 weeks early for the first time in years. I stocked the pantry without checking prices. I took Lainey out for a spontaneous mother-daughter day at the movies and let her get whatever snacks she wanted. That freedom made me feel powerful in a way I hadn't felt since my modeling days. My boutique was still open, but now it felt like a passion project instead of a lifeline. My energy shifted. I smiled more. I wore makeup again. I took longer showers. I stopped walking past mirrors so quickly. Amina made me feel alive. That's when I noticed him. Or, I should say, he noticed me. The screen name was simple, No Face King. He started with a single tip. More than average. Enough to get my attention. His message was polite. Complimented my voice. Said something about the way I moved my hands during a video that made him lose sleep. It wasn't crude, just specific. Then came the first custom request. He wanted a video of me brushing my hair slowly, whispering his screen name under my breath. He paid double my normal rate. I delivered it, feeling a little silly as I whispered, "No face king," into the camera, but his response? Immediate. Another tip. Another request. And it didn't stop there. He became a regular. Like clockwork, he would send detailed instructions. The requests escalated, but gradually, like a frog in boiling water. At first, it was tame. Then came the lingerie specifics, the angles, the phrases he liked. "Call me baby boy," he wrote once. Another time, "Tell me I'm a good boy for mommy." That made me pause. I stared at the message longer than I probably should have. I laughed. Not out loud, but one of those nervous exhales. The word mommy didn't feel sexy to me. It felt close. Too close. But people have kinks. And this was just another anonymous man behind a keyboard. Or so I told myself. He paid well. He tipped even better. And unlike a lot of others, he didn't cross the line with insults or threats. He stayed polite. Obsessively polite. He even asked me what my favorite tea was once. But there were moments, small ones, that made something tighten in my chest. He commented on the way I always wore my bracelets on my right wrist. Said it was a cute habit. I hadn't shown that in my videos. Not deliberately. The only way he could have known was if he'd seen me off-platform. Another time, he made a joke referencing a mug I once left in the background. It had a chipped edge with a faded cartoon heart. The mug wasn't special. But it was mine. It had been in our kitchen for years. No Face King wrote, "That heart mug looks like it's been through some things." Like its owner. That was the first time I felt a true chill. Still. I didn't stop. I told myself I was imagining things. I even tried to explain it away. Maybe I'd accidentally shown the bracelet or the mug in an older clip. Maybe I was just tired and overthinking it. But something deep inside me started whispering that I wasn't as anonymous as I thought. He never showed his face. That wasn't unusual. Plenty of men preferred it that way. They'd keep the camera pointed downward or covered, especially during video chats. Sometimes they wouldn't even speak, just type their requests into the chat box and expect me to perform. And honestly, I preferred that. It made it feel less personal. More like theater. No Face King asked for a private chat one night. He didn't speak. His camera stayed off, but he typed fast. He asked me to moan his name. When I saw it on the screen, Nathaniel, I hesitated. Not visibly. Not out loud. But inside, my stomach twisted. It was such a strange coincidence. That was my son's name. I paused the video, told him I'd refund the tip if he didn't want to change the name. He replied quickly, said he always used his real name because he liked hearing it. That it made him feel seen. I should have stopped there. I should have shut down the stream, blocked him, changed my name again, taken it as a sign. But I didn't. I told myself it was just a name. There are thousands of Nathaniels. I whispered it like he asked, swallowing the unease like a stone. I didn't want to ruin the illusion. Or the income. The next morning, I opened my email and saw a payment notification, multiple tips from the same account. He had paid for 4 videos in advance. The requests were explicit and very specific. He wanted me to use a certain colored toy. He wanted me to describe a fantasy that felt too familiar. He wanted me to say something I had once said in a joking voice, in real life, at dinner with the kids. That was when my hands started shaking. I logged off and went to check my OnlyFans dashboard, then my banking portal. I saw something that didn't make sense. The payments were routed through a card I recognized. The last 4 digits were mine. At first, I thought I had made some kind of internal purchase without realizing. Maybe I clicked the wrong thing or signed up for a feature by mistake. I called the customer service line. I asked them to walk me through it. They told me clearly, the card had been used to tip and purchase content. Repeatedly. Over $1,000. All going to me. I felt the blood drain from my face. My throat went dry. I thought I was being stalked. That someone had hacked into my personal financial data and was tormenting me from the inside. I filed a fraud report. I canceled the card. I sat in my bathroom with the door locked, holding my knees to my chest, trying to tell myself this was just some cybercriminal messing with me. I told myself that until it happened again the next month. Same charges. Same pattern. Same name in the private messages. That's when it stopped feeling like coincidence. And it started to feel like betrayal. It had been 2 weeks since I canceled the card. 2 weeks of pacing. Of waiting for something to make sense. 2 weeks of checking over my shoulder, first metaphorically, then literally. I stopped posting. I avoided my phone. I barely touched my laptop. I started locking my bedroom door again, something I hadn't done since the kids were toddlers. Something inside me knew that whatever this was, it wasn't over yet. I told myself it was someone online playing a twisted game. A client who had crossed a line. Maybe someone from town who recognized me by accident. I even wondered if KYNG somehow found out and was punishing me, but I knew that didn't add up. He barely knew how to use email, let alone how to hack into someone's card and pretend to be a faceless subscriber. No, this was different. This was close. Too close. It was late. Past midnight. I had just gotten Lainey to sleep after another round of her stomach cramps. She gets them when she's stressed, and she had been complaining more lately, probably feeding off my tension. I had just washed my face, trying to scrub away the shame that never seemed to lift, when I heard it. A knock. Soft. Barely a tap. But it was there. Right outside my bedroom door. I opened it, and there stood Nathaniel. 17 years old. Tall. Pale. Shoulders hunched. His bottom lip quivering like he had just stepped out of a nightmare. I remember the exact moment. How his eyes didn't quite meet mine. How he gripped the doorframe with both hands like he was trying to keep from falling. "Can I talk to you?" he said, voice low, like he didn't want to wake Lainey, or maybe like he didn't want the walls to hear. I nodded, stepped back. He walked in slowly and sat on the edge of my bed. He kept his hands in his lap and stared at the floor. I didn't say a word. I waited. And then, without looking up, he said it. "I think you already know." But, it was me. At first, I didn't understand. I blinked. My stomach turned. "What was you?" I asked, though I already felt the answer forming in the pit of my chest. He swallowed hard. His knuckles turned white. And then he looked up at me, eyes filled with something I hadn't seen before, guilt that cut straight through the air. "I was the one paying you. On the site. It was me, Mom." I didn't breathe. I just stood there. Frozen. He kept talking. His words came in bursts, choked with panic. He told me he hadn't meant to find me. That it was an accident. He was on Reddit, scrolling through a thread someone posted from an anonymous account. He clicked on a clip, just out of curiosity, he said. And then, he saw it. The birthmark. A small, crescent-shaped one just under my ribs. I'd always hated it. Covered it up during beach trips. I thought it made me look lopsided. But he recognized it instantly. He said he clicked away at first. Slammed his laptop shut. He said he felt sick. Disgusted. He tried to pretend he didn't see what he saw. But the image stuck with him. And then, it started to grow. The curiosity turned into something darker. Something he couldn't explain. I stared at him, and all I could feel was my skin trying to crawl off my bones. He kept talking. He said he created the account as a way to confirm what he saw. At first, he only watched. Then he started paying. He knew my voice. He knew the way I moved. And when I said the name, his name, during that private session, he knew I didn't know it was him. I collapsed. Right there on the floor. I don't remember if I screamed or cried first. I just remember the walls felt like they were closing in, and the air tasted wrong, and my son, my baby, was sitting on the edge of my bed with the weight of something that should have never, ever been his to carry. I vomited in the bathroom sink. My hands shook so hard I could barely keep myself upright. I locked the door behind me and slid to the floor, curled up like a child. I don't know how long I stayed in there. Maybe 10 minutes. Maybe an hour. When I finally opened the door again, he was still there. Silent. Tears streaked across his cheeks. He didn't say anything else. He didn't need to. I asked him how. How he paid. How he accessed the account. He told me he used the old credit card I'd once given him for emergencies. A prepaid card I'd forgotten was still active. He still had the number saved in a note on his phone. I had meant to cancel it last year, but I never got around to it. It never occurred to me it would be used against me. But this wasn't just about the money. This was deeper. Worse. Every request I had performed. Every act I had filmed. Every whispered moan or phrase that was tailored just for him, had been for my son. My child. I had performed for my own flesh and blood. And I didn't know. I didn't know. I smashed my webcam that night. Threw it against the wall until it shattered. I deleted everything, OnlyFans, my backup files, the Reddit burner accounts. Gone. I didn't even pause to look back. I just deleted. I didn't sleep. I didn't eat for 2 days. Every time I looked at Nathaniel, my stomach turned. I couldn't process it. I couldn't speak without my throat closing. I walked around the house like a ghost. I locked my bedroom at night. I avoided eye contact. I barely spoke unless it was to Lainey, and even then, I sounded hollow. I considered sending him to live with KYNG. More than once, I picked up the phone. But what would I even say? Our son found my anonymous porn account and became my top-paying subscriber. Can you take him in? The words didn't exist. The shame was too big. Too wide. Too sharp. I couldn't risk it. Lainey didn't know anything. And I needed to keep it that way. I told her I'd taken down my freelance work to focus on the boutique again. She didn't ask questions. I wish she had. I wish someone had. I thought deleting the account would erase everything. That if I just shut it down, broke the equipment, and cut off the money stream, then the shame would shrink. That the guilt would lose its claws. That maybe I could forget. But I couldn't. Every room in the house held echoes of what I didn't see. What I refused to see. The silence between Nathaniel and me had grown into something unbearable, thick and ugly, like wet cement in our lungs. I couldn't breathe near him. He couldn't meet my eyes. And neither of us had the tools to fix what we'd broken. So I made a decision. I scheduled an emergency counseling session. Not just for him. For both of us. That's how we ended up sitting in a stiff, sterile room on a Thursday afternoon, across from a man named Dr. Houston Doyle. Middle-aged. Soft-voiced. He wore plain sweaters and spoke in careful, measured tones that made it impossible to lie. I hated him instantly for being so calm. I told him the truth. All of it. Not right away, but enough. I told him I had created the account out of desperation. Not for fame. Not even really for money, though it had helped. I told him I did it because I felt invisible. Because after years of being neglected, discarded, brushed off, I needed someone to look at me and not flinch. I needed to feel like I mattered. Like I still had something left to offer. I didn't sugarcoat it. I told him about the first tip that made me feel noticed. The rush of power when strangers called me beautiful again. The way I invented someone else to be adored, and how easy it became to pretend that version of me was all that mattered. Nathaniel sat beside me, quiet at first. I don't think he knew what to say in that setting. For once, I didn't push. I let the silence hang until he finally spoke. He said he didn't understand what he was doing, not really. That at first, he thought it was just curiosity. But it turned into something else. Something darker. Something he didn't know how to stop. He said he didn't feel like my son anymore. He said I didn't feel like his mom. That wrecked me. He also admitted that he heard me crying through the walls the night he confessed. That he stood outside my bedroom door, hand raised, wanting to knock but too ashamed to come in again. We kept going back every week. Each session peeled back a little more. Sometimes, we yelled. Sometimes, I walked out halfway through and sat in my car with my head against the steering wheel, sobbing in that jagged, breathless way that made my whole body ache. But we showed up. And then the real explosion hit. Someone leaked screenshots. Not just to Reddit, but to a parenting forum. My photos. My messages. My profile name. Blurred face, but still too close to home. It only took 2 days before KYNG called. His voice was ice. He didn't ask questions. He didn't want details. He accused. You exposed our son to this filth, he said. You damaged him. You're sick. I tried to explain. Tried to tell him that I didn't know. That I hadn't meant for any of this to happen. But he didn't care. He'd already spoken to a lawyer. He was filing for full custody. Said I was unfit. Said Lainey wasn't safe in my care. And just like that, everything spiraled. I couldn't eat. Couldn't sleep. My hands trembled constantly. I was terrified they'd come knock on my door and take her away. That everything I had held together with duct tape and hope would collapse in one blow. I called the only person I could trust, Delilah Chapman, a friend from college who'd gone into family law. She didn't flinch. She came over that night, sat on my couch, and read everything. The screenshots. The emails. The messages. She didn't judge. She just nodded slowly and said, "We'll fight." Delilah filed a counter-motion, blocked the custody attempt, and began building a case around Nathaniel's access to the credit card, the lack of intent, the absence of abuse. She warned me that this would get ugly. That KYNG's lawyer would drag my name through the mud. That they'd twist the story until I looked like a monster. I told her I already felt like one. The weeks that followed were a blur of court dates and depositions and emergency therapy sessions. My boutique sat empty. I stopped showing up. I didn't have the strength to pretend to be normal anymore. Lainey kept asking why Dad was calling more. Why there were lawyers now. I lied. I said it was about taxes. She didn't believe me, but she didn't push. I think she sensed that asking would make things worse. And then there was me, trapped in this body that had once given me a sense of control, now reduced to something shameful. Something dangerous. I started deleting every photo of myself online. Every selfie. Every tagged image. I scrubbed the digital dust off of every corner I could find. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the feeling that it was all still out there. That someone was watching. That some trace of Amina still lingered in the dark corners of the internet. I thought about shutting everything down for good. Deleting my email. Getting off social media entirely. Moving to another state. Changing my name. But I couldn't run from what lived in my own house. And I couldn't run from myself. I stood in the mirror one morning, looking at a woman I no longer recognized. My hair was dull. My eyes swollen. My shoulders curled forward like I was trying to disappear. I used to think my body gave me power. Now, it felt like a cage. There's something strange that happens when you lose everything that once made you feel powerful. You don't just mourn the loss of control. You start asking questions you've spent years avoiding. Like, who am I when no one's watching? What's left of me when I stop performing? I used to think the answer was, nothing. But slowly, quietly, I started looking for pieces of myself that had nothing to do with sex, or performance, or applause. It began one night when I couldn't sleep. I had deleted all my accounts, blocked every website that led me down old pathways. I'd set up firewalls, changed every password, cleared my cache like it could wash away everything I had done. But the ache was still there. Not sexual, something lonelier. Heavier. I opened a blank document. No agenda. No audience. Just a blinking cursor. And I wrote. At first, it was nonsense. Scattered thoughts. Sentences that didn't fit together. But then something started taking shape. I wrote about what it meant to be a mother in a body the world still wanted. I wrote about shame. About the hunger for validation. About the ways women learn to disappear, even in their own homes. I created a blog under the name Annalise Sims, a name no one in my real life knew. This time, it wasn't about exposure. It wasn't about fantasy. It was about reflection. And if anyone ever found it, they'd only see someone trying to make sense of herself again. I wrote about parenting, too. About the digital spaces we ignore until it's too late. About the cracks that widen between mother and child when no one is paying attention. I didn't say what happened. I never named names. But I wrote enough to make it clear that mistakes had been made, deep ones. To my surprise, women began to comment. Anonymous, like me. Some were mothers. Some were daughters. Some were former creators themselves. The kind of women who had walked through fire and come out charred, but still standing. That small pocket of the internet became my refuge. I started speaking anonymously to women's support groups online. I gave tips on online safety, on protecting your identity, on how to talk to your children without shutting them down. I didn't feel like a savior. I didn't even feel like I was healing. But I wasn't drowning anymore. That counted for something. At home, things were still delicate, but changing. Nathaniel asked if he could speak during one of our therapy sessions. Not just to me. To Dr. Doyle. To himself. He took a deep breath and said he was sorry, not just for what he did, but for how long he let it eat at him. He said he never wanted to hurt me. That he didn't even fully understand what was happening until he saw the look on my face that night. Until he heard me sobbing through the walls. He said he was lonely. That, after his father left, he felt abandoned. Not just by KYNG, but by me. That I had been so busy trying to hold everything together, he felt like I had no room left for him. And when he saw me in that space, Amina, not mom, it confused something deep in him. Something he didn't have the words for. It wasn't an excuse. And he didn't try to make it one. But it was the first time I saw him speak from his chest. No screen. No disguise. Dr. Doyle suggested he join a youth support group, one that focuses on compulsive behavior in teenage boys. He hesitated. He didn't want to be the kid with a problem. But eventually, he agreed. That's where he met Travis Buckley, one of the program counselors. Travis wasn't like the other therapists. He didn't talk in riddles or treat them like broken glass. He was straightforward. Honest. He talked about emotional addiction. How pornography can fill a void if no one teaches you how to name your pain. How shame multiplies in silence. Nathaniel began volunteering there after a few months. He helped younger kids set up notebooks. Sat beside them in group meetings. Listened when they talked. And something in him started to settle. We still had hard days. Days when I couldn't look at him without remembering everything. Days when he'd see my shoulders tighten and would leave the room without a word. But we were trying. And trying had to count for something. Then there was Lainey. God, my sweet girl. She never said it, but I knew she felt forgotten. She never complained. She never asked why her big brother got to miss school for appointments while she stayed in her room drawing alone. One evening, I found one of her notebooks under the couch. She had drawn a picture of our family, stick figures, but there were only two of us. Me and her. Nathaniel was scribbled out in red. I sat on her bed that night and told her the only truth I could manage. That sometimes grown-ups make huge, painful mistakes. That sometimes even moms break things. But that didn't mean I loved her any less. I started carving time out, just for us. We went to the farmer's market on Sundays. We picked flowers and baked banana bread and painted our nails together. I bought matching journals. We wrote letters to each other and swapped them under pillows like secret notes. I told her she could ask me anything, and I'd always tell the truth, even if it hurt. Slowly, I felt her come back to me. She started calling me Mama again instead of Mom. It was small. But I held on to it like a lifeline. We were all still fragile. But we were moving. And in the quiet moments, when the house was still and I was alone with my thoughts, I realized something. Redemption isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself with trumpets or grand apologies. Sometimes, it's just a single, quiet breath after weeks of drowning. It took time. Longer than I wanted to admit. But eventually, I began to speak again. Not with lingerie and whispering lips. Not on camera. Not behind the veil of Amina or any other alias that let me disappear. No. This time, I spoke as myself. Not Liv the boutique owner. Not Liv the mom. Just Liv, the woman who had walked through fire and came out a little burned, a little wiser, and a lot less willing to hide. I started with a private online support group. A space for women like me, women who had blurred the line between confidence and performance, who had lost themselves in the feedback loop of validation. Some were former creators. Some were stay-at-home moms. Some were both. I didn't lead with shame. I led with truth. I told them what I had done, and what I hadn't. I didn't glorify it. I didn't moralize it. I just told it. From there, I created content again, but this time under my real name. No filters. No fiction. I posted about parenting teens in a digital age. About talking to your kids before the internet does. I made short videos, just voiceover with quotes and gentle music, on trauma, boundaries, and healing. I shared what I had learned through therapy, through silence, through sleepless nights curled up in my bathroom, unable to breathe. And slowly, women started to listen. Not thousands. Not millions. But enough. Enough to make me feel like maybe something good could grow from the wreckage. Then one night, months later, I was up late. Couldn't sleep. I was on Reddit, not under my own name, but just browsing through parenting threads, following recovery stories, skimming articles on digital safety. And that's when I saw it. A comment. From a user called NoFaceKing2. I froze. The name hit me like a fist. The comment was subtle. Innocent to someone else's eyes. But I knew. It mentioned a woman with a soft voice and a heart-shaped tattoo hidden under her rib. Said something about missing the way she used to say his name like it meant something. My blood turned cold. I didn't comment. I didn't react. I logged out. Deleted the account. Again. And this time, I didn't create a new one. I closed the laptop. Sat in bed for a while with my knees pulled to my chest. The room was silent except for the clock ticking beside me. And then I opened my journal. The same one I had bought with Lainey. The one with our matching stickers on the cover. And I wrote one line, I wanted to be seen. I didn't realize I already was. Too much. Too close. Some secrets are never worth the price of attention. Not when they cost you your children, your peace, your sense of self. We all want to be wanted. But what happens when being wanted turns into being consumed? I don't have all the answers. I only have this story. If you think you're alone in your shame, you're not. You're not the first to feel invisible. You're not the only one who's made choices in the dark just to feel something. But secrets online don't stay secret forever. Not when your audience is closer than you think. So let me ask you something. If you were in my shoes, if your child found the version of you that you tried so hard to keep hidden, what would you have done? Would you delete everything? Would you confess? Would you lie to protect them? Or tell the truth and risk losing them? I'm not here to tell you what's right or wrong. I just want you to ask yourself, who are you when no one's watching? And who are you performing for? If this story moved you, if it made you think, or feel, or sit in silence for a moment longer than usual, please like and share it. Leave a comment below. Tell me what you would have done. Tell me if you've ever felt the same kind of ache. And if you think someone needs to hear this, send it to them. And don't forget to subscribe.